She paid just $2,000 for the deed to an abandoned racetrack, cracked asphalt, crumbling stands, and silence where engines once roared. Ellie didn't buy it for the nostalgia. She bought it because it felt like home. But when she uncovered a sealed door behind Turn 4 and stepped into a forgotten bunker, she didn't just find history, she found the unfinished dream of someone she thought she'd lost forever. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if you believe that some places remember the people who built them, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's story, it's even more powerful than this one. Let's begin. The first time Ellie saw the place, it was through a chain-link fence bent inward, like something had tried to escape. The old racetrack sat like a fossil in the Georgia sun, all cracked asphalt and faded sponsor banners clinging to the wind. Grass had grown through the lanes, and the once proud bleachers leaned as if tired from holding too many stories. Ellie pressed her fingers against the warm metal of the gate. She didn't know why she was here. Not really. The listing had been vague. Historic Speedway property, 47 acres, sold as, is. No utilities, no inspections. But something in her chest had told her to come anyway. It had been 3 years since her brother Jack died in a wreck nobody could explain. 3 years of trying to keep his memory alive by fixing cars he once swore at. 3 years of hearing his laugh in empty garages. Ellie was 26 now. Running a one-bay shop her uncle helped her keep afloat. She'd sold her only reliable truck to scrape together the down payment for this place. It didn't make sense. But grief rarely asked for permission. She climbed the gate and walked slowly to the center of the track. Dust kicked up around her boots. In the stillness, she imagined engines. The roar of V8s in a tight turn. The smell of burnt rubber and hot oil. She could almost hear Jack shouting over the noise, coaching her through a turn, like when they were kids, and he let her drive laps after hours. The old tower still stood near the pit lane, its windows cloudy and broken. She climbed the rickety stairs, each creak echoing like a warning. At the top, she found nothing but bird nests and a sun-bleached clipboard. But from there, she could see everything. The curves, the dips, the straightaway that once clocked records. Her heart beat faster. Not from the view, from memory. Back on the ground, she walked along the perimeter, boots crunching on gravel and shattered dreams. Behind Turn 4, she noticed a strange patch of dirt. Unlike the rest, it wasn't overgrown. The grass here was short, brittle, like something had kept it from growing too wild. She crouched and brushed her hand across the soil. That's when she felt it, the slight click of metal beneath her fingers. A handle, half buried, rusted, locked. Ellie stood slowly, heart thudding. The bunker wasn't in the listing. No one mentioned a sublevel, and yet, here it was sealed, hidden, waiting. She didn't try to force it. Not yet. She marked the spot with a piece of rebar from a collapsed fence and backed away. Something about it felt personal, like it was watching her as much as she was watching it. That night, she couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because for the first time in years, something felt unfinished. And maybe, just maybe, she was the one meant to finish it. The next morning, Ellie returned before sunrise, her backpack filled with basic tools, gloves, and a half-eaten granola bar she forgot to finish. Dew clung to the weeds as she made her way past the gate again, this time without hesitation. The racetrack still held its eerie quiet, but it didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt like it was holding its breath. She walked straight to the rebar marker behind Turn 4, crouched again, and began clearing the dirt in earnest. Her gloved hands scraped away decades of dust and debris until the full shape of the door revealed itself. A rusted metal hatch, rectangular, reinforced, with 2 heavy latches bolted shut and a handle that looked like it hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. Ellie leaned back on her heels, breathing hard. "What the hell were you hiding, Jack?" she murmured. The padlock was seized, but a few solid hits with the claw of her hammer and a splash of WD-40 cracked it loose. The latches groaned like they were waking from a deep sleep. She grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. She leaned her weight into it, rocking it back and forth, until suddenly, it gave. The hatch let out a hiss, like old air escaping. Beneath it, concrete steps descended into shadow. Ellie sat there a moment, blinking. A tunnel. A real one. No lights. No airflow. Just silence, and the faint smell of oil and time. She pulled out her flashlight and aimed it down. The beam revealed walls, lined with dusty metal piping and peeling paint. The concrete was dry, but the air felt cold. She wasn't ready to go in yet. Not alone. Instead, she circled back to explore the rest of the racetrack. Something about the place pulled at her like the racetrack was more than asphalt and steel, like it was telling a story in rust and ruin. Underneath the bleachers, she found what used to be a mechanic's bay oil-stained concrete, an overturned cart of sockets, a pegboard with outlines of tools long since gone. An old race number 47 lay half covered in dirt. She picked it up, ran her fingers over the flaking paint. Jack used to race with 47. That number wasn't coincidence. Behind a cracked workbench drawer, Ellie found a small notebook. The cover was stiff with age, but inside, Jack's handwriting curled across the pages like ghosts. Lap times, gear ratios, tuning notes. One entry was circled. New prototype handling better. Test #7 ran clean. Still need to fix battery drain. Don't show anyone. Her breath caught. Prototype? She flipped through more pages. There were sketches of something that looked like a hybrid engine. Hand-drawn schematics, battery modules, wiring maps. These weren't typical racer notes. Jack had been working on something advanced, experimental, and he hadn't told her. She stared out across the overgrown track again, eyes tracing the turns he used to take like they were prayers. If this was where Jack's dream ended, then maybe it was where hers had to begin. The bunker could wait one more day, but not much longer. Ellie didn't sleep much that night. She kept her brother's journal open on the kitchen table, reading through the same pages over and over. The words felt like echoes, unfinished thoughts left behind by someone who was always thinking 10 steps ahead. Jack was brilliant, reckless, secretive, but this was different. These weren't just race notes. They were blueprints for something she didn't yet understand. By morning, the fog over the hills had barely lifted when she pulled up to the racetrack again. The bunker had been calling to her in that quiet, heavy way only unfinished things do. She brought more this time: a generator, portable work light, bolt cutters, an old wrench set, and a thermal coffee mug she didn't plan to share. The sun was barely up as she parked beside the chain-link gate and hauled her gear past the stands. The hatch loomed behind turn 4 like a sleeping giant. Its hinges groaned when she pulled it open again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She clicked on the work light, tied the cord to a car battery, and began her descent down the narrow concrete staircase. Her footsteps echoed with each cautious step. The smell of rust and oil thickened the deeper she went. The stairs led to a small landing, then turned sharply into a corridor maybe 30 feet long, walls lined with corroded conduit. At the end was another door, this one heavier, sealed tight with an old keypad and a keyhole beneath it. She crouched, inspected it. The pad was dusty, but intact. The keyhole looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Ellie stood slowly, flashlight dancing across the metal door. Something about the combination electronic and mechanical told her this wasn't just a storm shelter or storage unit. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep this sealed, and if Jack had built it, he wouldn't have made it easy. Back upstairs, she rummaged through her backpack and pulled out Jack's notebook again. She flipped back to the circled entry. Test #7 ran clean. On the bottom corner of that page, nearly faded into the paper, was a 6-digit number, 070403. The date of his first win at the track. She entered it into the keypad. A soft click, but the door didn't open. The keypad light turned green, but the lock held firm. Ellie exhaled. Halfway there, she leaned against the wall and looked around the small concrete room. Something caught her eye. A dented metal toolbox wedged behind an old pipe. She dragged it out and pried it open. Inside was a single item, a worn brass key. Her hand trembled slightly as she fitted into the door's lock. It turned with a stiff click, then released with a low groan. The door cracked open, just a few inches at first, enough for the cold air to breathe out. She pulled it wide. The light spilled in slowly, revealing the bunker, and what lay beyond it wasn't dust or decay. It was a workshop, hidden, preserved, waiting. Ellie stood just inside the threshold, barely breathing. The light from her portable lamp cast long shadows across the underground room, revealing a space frozen in time. Dust floated like ash in the air, but everything was intact, too intact. Metal cabinets lined the walls, a full workbench stretched along the far side, and in the center of the room sat what looked like the stripped-down frame of a race car, sleek, skeletal, and unfamiliar. She stepped inside slowly, the concrete floor cool beneath her boots. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the worklight. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Every inch of this bunker radiated Jack's energy. His chaos, his genius, his obsession. She circled the car frame, first lightweight chassis, low suspension, no internal combustion engine in sight. Instead, it had something different, mounted in the rear. A battery system. High-density cells wired to what looked like a custom powertrain. It wasn't like anything Ellie had seen in a traditional race build. Jack wasn't just modifying. He was inventing. She found more on the bench. Sketches taped to the wall, hastily drawn with Sharpie on drafting paper. Wire routing, torque conversion equations, cooling system blueprints. Each one bore his signature at the bottom. In the corner of the room sat an old cassette recorder beside a crate of tapes. Ellie picked one up, squinted at the label. Bunker log number 03. Drivetrain test. With trembling hands, she pushed the tape in and hit play. Static. Then Jack's voice, calm, clipped, focused. Log 3. Front axle torque holding under max load. Rear system overheating. Need to increase flow rate in cooling loop. Might try splitting the battery pack, if I can find another donor frame. She closed her eyes. It was like he was right there. Not the Jack she remembered from childhood, goofing off in the pit, teasing her about her wrench grip, but the version of him she only saw toward the end. Quiet. Distant. Driven. She listened to 3 more tapes, each more technical than the last. But it wasn't just engineering. In one, his voice cracked when he talked about the pressure, about expectations, about trying to outrun shadows no one else could see. Ellie sat on a metal stool by the bench, cassette still playing. The realization hit her slowly. This wasn't just a car. It was a project Jack was pouring himself into, probably after dark, probably in secret. Whatever it was meant to become, he never got the chance to finish it. And maybe no one ever knew it existed. She reached under the bench and pulled out a cardboard file box, labeled simply, Phase 4. Inside were USB drives, hard copies of electrical diagrams, an old laptop with a cracked screen. Tucked between the folders was a photo Jack, covered in grease, standing beside the same frame that now sat before her, unfinished, but alive with potential. Ellie held the photo in her lap and whispered into the quiet, "What were you building, Jack?" The bunker didn't answer, but the blueprints might. The next few days blurred into each other as Ellie all but moved into the bunker. She brought down extra lights, cleared out the dust, and made herself a workspace beside Jack's old bench. Every evening, after closing the garage back in town, she returned to the racetrack not to restore it, but to understand it. What started as curiosity had become something deeper, heavier. She wasn't just fixing a forgotten car. She was trying to finish a piece of her brother's soul. The more she decoded Jack's notes, the more advanced the build became. The car he designed didn't follow traditional specs. It was lighter, more agile, powered by a dual-core battery system that balanced torque and acceleration in a way she'd never seen before. His drawings weren't theoretical either. They were implementable, real. But there were gaps, references to support teams, NDAs, and test data logged off-site. It wasn't just a solo project. At some point, Jack had worked with others. Ellie needed more answers. So she made the mistake of asking around. At Max Auto, the oldest parts place in town. She casually mentioned Jack's name while buying cables. The owner, a stooped man with nicotine-stained fingers, went quiet. He was a good kid, he finally muttered, scanning her items. Too smart for his own good. What do you mean? He didn't meet her eyes. Some engines aren't meant to run. Then at the diner, she ran into Lenora, one of Jack's old pit crew teammates. When Ellie brought up the prototype, the woman's expression shifted from nostalgia to caution in a breath. Don't dig too deep, Elle, Lenora warned, voice low. There's things Jack got involved in before he died. Quiet things. Things he didn't talk about, even to us. Like what? But Lenora just shook her head and slid out of the booth without finishing her coffee. Later that night, Ellie was back in the bunker, staring at Jack's schematics, her mind buzzing with warnings and half-truths. That's when she noticed it, a folder on the old laptop labeled Clearance. Inside was a string of encrypted files, most unreadable, but one document opened a letter of intent between a private defense contractor and an unnamed consulting engineer. It was unsigned, but the timeline matched the year before Jack's crash. It wasn't just a race car. Jack had been designing something for high-speed data capture and stealth movement for surveillance. Maybe even more. Her chest tightened. Had Jack walked away from that deal, or had he been silenced? She leaned back in the chair, the cassette tapes now silent around her. The track above her head, once just a curiosity, now felt like a lid, like a grave. And then came the sound, faint, metallic, unmistakable, a car door slamming in the distance. She killed the light, waited. Someone else was here. For the first time since opening that hatch, Ellie didn't feel like the racetrack was hers anymore. She felt like she was being watched. Ellie waited in the dark bunker, muscles tight, breath shallow. Above, the track was silent again. Too silent. She didn't move for 10 minutes, listening. No footsteps, no engines. Just wind sliding through broken bleacher beams and the soft creak of rusted metal in the rafters. Whoever had slammed that door hadn't come down, but they knew she was here now. That much felt certain. The next morning, she considered not returning. Just locking the hatch, walking away, pretending it was all some strange detour in the long map of grief. But Jack's notebook sat on her kitchen counter, and the photo of him beside the prototype had a pull stronger than fear. By noon, she was back in the bunker, coffee in hand, heart steadier. If someone was watching, so be it. Let them. She wasn't trespassing. She wasn't stealing. She was continuing something that had already been abandoned, maybe intentionally, maybe not. She powered up the old laptop and ran diagnostics through the interface Jack had left behind. The data readouts were crude but functional. Battery efficiency was higher than expected, even after years of dormancy. The wiring checks showed minimal degradation. The prototype, whatever it was originally built for, still had potential. Ellie took inventory of every component in the room. She listed parts, sourced replacements from her own shop, and began cleaning the chassis. Day by day, she reassembled what she could, following Jack's instructions like a recipe laced with memory. There was something almost sacred in the process. Every bolt she tightened felt like a thread stitched between them. One night, while removing the rear suspension casing, she found something tucked beneath the floor plate, a small velvet pouch tied with frayed string. Inside, a street, Christopher metal, dulled with age, and a folded note written in Jack's unmistakable scrawl. If you found this, Elle, it means you didn't listen when I told you to leave it alone. Typical. But maybe I hoped you wouldn't. She sank onto the floor, back pressed to the cold wall, the note trembling in her hands. They wanted this tech, not for racing, not for progress, for control. I said no. They didn't like that. If anything happens to me, finish it your way. Don't let them bury it. Don't let me disappear. Her throat closed. She hadn't cried since the funeral. Not really. But now the tears came fast, silent, unstoppable. She whispered into the quiet, I won't let you disappear. From that moment forward, it wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was purpose. She built late into the night, soldering connections, replacing lines, polishing panels. She didn't have Jack's resources. She didn't have his team. But she had his blueprints. And she had her own stubbornness, the same trait he used to tease her for. Days passed. One night, just after midnight, she slid behind the prototype's wheel, still bare bones, still unfinished. She turned the key, and for the first time in years, Jack's engine purred back to life. Silent, electric, alive. The engine's hum was so soft it barely registered, but to Ellie, it was thunder. She sat behind the wheel, every nerve on edge, the bunker filled with a low, steady vibration that felt like it was coming from inside her bones. The car, Jack's unfinished dream, wasn't just working, it was whispering, breathing, waiting. She didn't drive it that night. Not yet. Instead, she powered it down gently, checked the voltage levels twice, then a third time just to be sure. Everything looked clean. No shorts. No sudden temperature spikes. The battery cells were stable. The regenerative brake system, a concept Jack had scribbled in a margin years ago, was showing full feedback potential. It was real. It worked, and no one knew it existed. Ellie climbed out of the driver's seat and backed away slowly, staring at the sleek, matte black frame under the workshop lights. It wasn't beautiful in a conventional way, no chrome, no body paint, no emblems. But it was elegant, efficient. It was Jack, distilled into steel. She stood in the quiet bunker, hands resting on the roofline, and whispered, "We're not done yet." The next night, she rolled the car to the loading platform, at the far end of the bunker, where a secondary ramp, camouflaged beneath a corrugated tin shed behind the pit lane, led up to the surface. She'd cleared it earlier, unsure why. Now she knew. It was time. She waited until nearly 2 a.m. The town was asleep, the hills wrapped in silence. Stars spilled across the sky like spilled grease on asphalt. No wind, no lights, just her, the car, and the ghost of a track. She opened the ramp door and rolled the prototype up to the edge of the cracked starting line. The track was rough, cracked, overgrown in places, but still a loop, still sacred. Ellie climbed into the seat. No helmet, no harness, just gloves and memory. She turned the key. The engine came alive, with a sound like held breath. Then she pressed the accelerator. The car moved forward not with a roar but a whisper. No combustion, no exhaust, just motion. Pure, immediate, responsive. The kind of power that didn't scream for attention. It simply moved, like it belonged. She took the first lap slow, steering around debris, testing the brakes. The car handled like it was reading her mind. Every turn felt deliberate, controlled, the weight distribution perfect. Jack's notes hadn't lied. On the second lap, she opened it up. The prototype surged forward, tires gripping the fractured asphalt, with shocking precision. The wind tore past her face. For the first time since Jack's death, she felt something crack open inside her, something wild and sharp and beautiful. Not grief, not even closure. Flight. When she eased to a stop after the third lap, she was shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. But she wasn't alone. In the distance, at the edge of the fence line, a shadow moved. Then another. Ellie killed the engine, heart hammering. Someone was watching. Again. Ellie didn't sleep that night. After she backed the prototype into the bunker and sealed the ramp shut, she sat on the cold floor for hours, eyes fixed on the cassette tapes stacked beside her. One of them labeled simply, "Final Test." She hadn't dared to play. Not yet. Not while she still felt the electricity of the drive humming in her fingertips. Not while the adrenaline from seeing those figures at the fence was still leaking slowly from her bones. She replayed the laps in her head. The silence, the speed, the precision. Jack hadn't just built a car, he'd built a message, a possibility. Something that proved an idea didn't need noise to be powerful. But it was more than just performance. This car defied everything people thought they knew about racing, about energy, about control, and that made it dangerous. Just after midnight, as Ellie finally drifted into a shallow, exhausted sleep in her small camper, parked near the grandstands. Someone knocked on the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She jolted upright. No headlights, no footsteps. Just a shadowy shape beyond the foggy window. She opened the door cautiously, wrench in hand. A man stood just outside the camper's light, late 50s, clean-shaven, wearing a gray jacket, too plain to be casual and too tailored to be innocent. His voice was calm, clipped, like someone used to being listened to. "You're Eleanor Keene?" She didn't answer. "I'm not here to stop you," he said, raising his hands. "But I'm also not here by accident." Ellie stepped outside slowly, barefoot in the gravel, heart pounding harder than it had during the test drive. "I know what you found," he continued. "More importantly, I know who built it." "You knew my brother?" "I read his file," he said, like that explained everything. Jack was supposed to deliver a prototype to a private contractor 4 months before his crash. He never showed. The project was classified and buried. We assumed the prototype was lost. "Not lost," Ellie said. "Just hidden." The man nodded slowly. "And now, it's been activated." That sent a chill through her. "You watched me," she said. "At the track." "I needed to be sure," he replied. "We've seen others try to replicate his work. No one got close. Until now." She crossed her arms. "So what happens next? You take it? Shut this down?" "No," he said. "But you need to understand something. If you make this public, if you let the world see what your brother built, you'll be stepping into a place you can't step back from. This won't just be a restoration project anymore. It'll be history. And history has teeth." He pulled a card from his pocket. "No name, just a number. If you go forward," he said, "do it with your eyes open." Then he turned, walked into the darkness, and disappeared down the gravel road. Ellie stood there for a long time, the card cold in her hand. She looked toward the bunker and made up her mind. The next morning, the wind carried a different weight, like the track could feel what was coming. Ellie stood at the center of the cracked asphalt, staring at the weather-worn bleachers that hadn't seen a crowd in over a decade. But today, they would. Maybe not thousands, but enough. She'd made her decision, not just to test the car, but to show it. To honor Jack not by keeping his work in the dark, but by doing the one thing he would have wanted most. To let it run, to let it breathe, in front of the people who once cheered for him and never knew what he left behind. By noon, she'd posted a quiet message on a local racing forum. 1 lap, 1 car, 1 night only. The old Glen Ridge Speedway isn't dead yet. She didn't expect much. But by dusk, pickup trucks and motorcycles began pulling in, parking in the overgrown grass. Former racers, curious teens. A local news van she hadn't invited. And tucked near the fence line, behind a pair of mirrored sunglasses, stood Lenora, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Ellie walked past her, nodded. "You came," Lenora shrugged. "Didn't want history happening without me." As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the track, Ellie wheeled the prototype from the bunker ramp and onto the pavement. It still looked unfinished. No paint, no branding, no number. Just a body that didn't beg for attention. Only respect. A hush fell over the crowd. No announcer, no music. Just the whisper of wind and the tension of 100 held breaths. Ellie climbed in. She didn't wear a race suit, just her old work boots and a black hoodie with grease on the sleeves. Jack Street Christopher medal dangled from the ignition switch. His final cassette, final test, sat in her pocket, unplayed. She turned the key. The engine hummed alive. The crowd leaned forward, and then she accelerated. Not to show off, not to break records, just to let it run. The car moved like it had been waiting for this moment. Like every circuit, every capacitor, every bolt had memory built into it. It cut the curves with fluid grace, glided along the straightaway like it remembered where Jack used to floor it. Even the rough patches felt smoothed by intention. The bleachers erupted not with stadium cheers, but with gasps, laughter, awe. People weren't watching a race. They were watching a resurrection. 1 lap, She pulled it to a slow stop near the infield, heart pounding. The engine wound down into silence, and for a moment, that silence was holy. Then came the footsteps. Lenora approached first. "He would have been proud," she said quietly. Then came the questions from reporters, racers, engineers with notebooks. One asked who had built the car. Ellie simply replied, "My brother. I just finished what he started." As the night wrapped itself around the track, cameras flashed, and voices rose, but Ellie didn't hear them. She was already looking toward the next lap, not for Jack, with him. In the weeks that followed the midnight race, everything changed, just not in the way Ellie expected. She didn't wake up to fame or headlines. She wasn't flooded with sponsors or patent offers. Instead, the change was quieter, deeper. It lived in the way people looked at the track now with reverence. It echoed in the calls she got from former racers, engineers, even teachers asking how they could help. The track had become something more than abandoned pavement. It had become proof that buried dreams could be revived, and that unfinished stories didn't have to end. Ellie spent her mornings at her garage, and her nights in the bunker, finishing the build the way Jack outlined it. With every tweak, every adjustment, she felt herself step more into his shoes, not to replace him, but to walk beside him, if only in memory. One afternoon, she finally played the tape labeled "Final Test." Jack's voice was softer this time, tired, but clear. "If you're hearing this, Elle, you probably went looking, huh? I knew you would. You always did dig where others walked away. I wish I could have shown you this myself. But if you're finishing it, if you're driving it, then you already know what it meant to me. This car wasn't just about speed. It was about proving that silence can win. That power doesn't have to roar to be real. If you share it on your terms. Don't let them twist it. And Elle, make it yours. Promise me that." She sat with that for a long time, the tape still spinning on a silent loop. Then she stood, grabbed a can of red paint from the back shelf, and sprayed the number 47 across the side panel, bold, uneven, perfect. The prototype wasn't Jack's anymore. It was theirs. Soon, people started calling it the ghost car, a whisper on wheels, a miracle from a forgotten track. Word spread fast, stories in niche tech blogs, a short documentary, even an invite from a racing innovation summit in Nevada. Ellie declined most of it. She didn't need the spotlight. She had something better. Purpose. She reopened the Glen Ridge Speedway, not as a business, but as a workshop, a place for aspiring mechanics, teen drivers, and retired pit crew veterans. They came not to watch, but to build, to learn, to remember. She called it the circuit. One night, just before closing the bunker, she found something Jack had hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. A second prototype frame, unfinished. Waiting. She laughed out loud, alone in the silence. Of course he'd left her one more puzzle. She rolled up her sleeves. The engine could wait. The story wouldn't. And so, beneath a sky full of stars and a track lined with ghosts, Ellie turned the key on a legacy not built in chrome or dollars, but in silence, persistence, and the kind of love that doesn't fade just because someone's gone. Jack's dream hadn't died. It had evolved, and now, it had a driver.